Chapter 4, Section 4, we are going to graph these functions, and we can do this with our graphing calculator very nicely. If we go right here to y equals, we can enter the 2x plus 1, so 2x plus 1, and then if you hit graph, it actually shows you a graph of what that line looks like. Now what we want is a little table here for our x, y values. And if you hit the second key right here and then table, that gives you your values. So we have 0, 1, 1, 3, 2, 5. And I'm going to graph those three numbers, 0, 1, 1, 3, 2, 5, and that's enough to show you what the line looks like. Now you may say to yourself, I don't have a graphing calculator, how do I do this? Well, you can do the same thing without a graphing calculator. If you put 0 in here, negative 3 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, plus 2 is negative 1, and negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, plus 2 is negative 4. So we can graph 0, 2, 1, negative 1, and 2, negative 4. In your graph looks like that. And I'm going to check this one on my graphing calculator. If you want to get out of this, you do second, quit. I'm going to go back to y equals. I'm going to type in negative 3x plus 2, and then I can hit graph. Looks pretty close to my line. And if you do second and table, 0, 2, 1, negative 1, 2, negative 4. And I think your notes are a little different than mine, so I have to move to the next page. I don't think you have to yet. Number 3, we have to just evaluate for these three numbers. This is our domain, so these are our x values. So we're going to do 2 times negative 3 minus 3y equals negative 6, which becomes negative 6 plus 3y equals negative 6. If we add 6 to both sides, 3y equals 0. So y equals 0. So if you put a negative 3 in there, you get a 0. I'm going to move over here, and I'm going to put the 0. I'm going to do it right down here. Put the 0 in. 2 times 0 is 0. Minus 3y equals negative 6. So that becomes negative 3y equals negative 6. And y equals 2. If we put the 3 in there, 2 times 3 is 6. And if we subtract 6 from both sides, you get negative 3y equals negative 12. So y equals 4. And 2 times 6, putting the 6 in there, is 12 minus 3y equals negative 6. Subtracting 12 from both sides, you get negative 3y equals negative 18. And y equals 6. So we have negative 3, 0, 0, 2, 3, 4, and then 6, 6. And since they gave us points, we just want points. You don't want to draw a line in there. Letter D. I'm going to kind of manipulate this equation first. I'm going to add x to both sides, and then you have 2y equals x plus 6. And then I'm going to divide everything by 2. And that becomes y equals 1/2 x plus 3. And the advantage of writing it like that is that now we can enter it in our graphing calculator. Second quit gets us out of there. Y equals 0.5x plus 3. You can graph it and see what your line should look like. And then you can do second table. Now remember, we only need to graph these points. So I'm going to go up here to a negative 4, gives me 1. Negative 2, it gives me 2. 0, it gives me 3. And 2, we get 4. So 1, negative 4. Negative 2, 2. Oh, I'm sorry, I graphed that first one wrong. I'm sorry. Negative 4, 1. I picked the wrong ones. Negative 4, 1. Negative 2, 2. 0, 3. And then 2, 4. So your line looks like that, and actually we just want dots, so it looks like that. And if you don't have a graphing calculator, you can still do these. You can put this in for x. You put the negative in for a negative x. You would have 4 plus 2y equals 6. And if you solved that, you would have 2y equals 2. So y equals 1. So when I put the negative 4 in here, this was my equation, and you'll see I got my x the same value for y. Number 5, I'm going to enter this one in our graphing calculator again. Go to y equals, you're going to do x, which is right here, squared, which is right here, and then plus 1. And I'm going to hit delete to get rid of that stuff that's still on there. When we graph this, that's a parabola. We only need the values for negative 3, negative 1, 0, 1, and 3. So I'm going to do second in table, and this will be negative 3, 10. Negative 1, 2, 0, 1, 1, 2, and 3, 10. So negative 3, 10. Negative 1, 2, 0, 1, 1, 2, and 3, 10. And again, if you don't have a graphing calculator, you can do negative 3 squared is 9, plus 1 is 10. Actually, let's do the second one that way. Negative 2 squared is 4. Minus 1 is 3. Negative 1 squared is 1. Minus 1 is 0. 0 squared is 0. minus 1 is negative 1. 1 squared is 1, minus 1 is 0, and 2 squared is 4, minus 1 is 3. So we will have negative 2, 3, negative 1, 0, 0, negative 1, 1, 0, 2, 3. Next one is an absolute value, and I will tell you an absolute value graph is V-shaped, and we have to make sure we find the bottom of that V first. If we put a 0 in here, absolute value of 0 is 0, minus 5 is negative 5. Absolute value of 1 is 1, minus 5 is negative 4. Absolute value of 2 is 2. Minus 5 is a negative 3. Absolute value of 3 is 3. Minus 5 is negative 2. Absolute value of 4 is 4. Minus 5 is negative 1. Absolute value is 5. Minus 5 is 0. And absolute value of 6 is 6. Minus 5 is 1. And I don't see any change in our numbers here. So I'm actually going to go up 1 and put an absolute value of negative 1. Absolute value of negative 1 is 1. Minus 5 is negative 4. And here, since these are both negative 4, you can see that this is the lowest point, and here they start going up. So that's how it forms our V. So we have 0, negative 5, 1, negative 4, and then also negative 1, negative 4. So this is where the V forms. That's your absolute value graph. And if you want to do that on your calculator and you go to y equals, you have to hit your math key, and then you have to go over to this number, so you arrow over to 1, and you see absolute value. You would put your x in there, and then close your parenthesis, and then minus 5. And if you graph that, you'll see the V shape, and if you do second table, you'll see you can get your values there. Let's use the graphing calculator for the second one. Go to y equals absolute value of x. We already have the absolute value of x in there, so I'm just going to change that to a plus 2. One more time, to get absolute value, go to math and then arrow over 1. If you hit graph, you can see the V-shaped, and then second table, and it will give us some values. You see right here, 0, 2 is kind of the lowest point. So I'm going to do negative 2, 4, negative 1, 3, 0, 2, 1, 3, and 2, 4. And when you graph those, you can see your V shape, and you should put the arrows on those. 9 and 10, we are asked to evaluate the functions for f of x equals x to the third for f of 3. So we're going to put 3 in there to the third power. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. And second one, 1/3 of 6 is 2. Plus 2 is 4. And I guess I could write this as f of 3 is 27, and, oops, this one is h. h of 6 is 4. And that's the value of that function at 6. And then we have a problem-solving application. The function y equals 2.5x describes how many millimeters sea level rises in x years. Graph the function and then use it to estimate how far it will rise in 7 years. And I'm going to, since this graph is so tiny, have every 2 actually be 1. So that will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I will have each of these be a millimeter. So in 1 year, it would raise 2.5 millimeters. 2 years, it would be 5 millimeters. 3 years would be 7.5. 4 years would be 10. 5 years would be 12.5. 16 years would be 15. I'm sorry, 6 years would be 15, and then 7 years would be 17.5. And if you graphed that line, you could figure it out, or 7 years would be 17.5 millimeters.